Ladies and gentlemen, when you look around at your life right now, perhaps you see the silence of waiting pressing in on you like a heavy weight. Maybe you've hoped, you've believed, and still nothing seems to move. The doors you knocked on stayed shut. The opportunities you thought were yours slipped through your fingers, and the people you relied on turned away. And you wonder, God, have you forgotten me? But I tell you this with conviction burning in my soul, that God has not forgotten you. God has not turned his back on you. God has not left you in the shadows of delay for no reason. The waiting you feel is not wasted time. It is the very ground where God is preparing the soil for your greatest victory. And when God shifts your waiting, it will not be a small change. It will not be a minor adjustment. It will be a sweeping, undeniable, unstoppable victory that only God himself could orchestrate. The truth is, every person under the sound of my voice knows what it feels like to wait. We wait for doors to open. We wait for healing. We wait for breakthrough. We wait for answers that seem long overdue. But let me remind you, when God has you in a season of waiting, it is not because he is punishing you. It is because he is positioning you. The silence you feel right now is not God's absence. It is God's strategy. God allows waiting because he knows that the victory he is preparing requires foundation so strong, so unshakable, that when the breakthrough comes, nothing and no one will be able to take it away from you. What looks like delay is actually divine design. You may feel like the waiting has drained you, like you've run out of strength to keep hoping. But that's when God does his best work. That's when God steps in and says, now I will show you that it was not your timing that mattered, but mine. Not your strength that carried you, but mine. Not your wisdom that sustained you, but mine. God will not allow the waiting to end in defeat. God will shift the waiting into a testimony that will not only bless your life, but will cause others to look at you and say, surely God was with them. For what is impossible for men is possible with God. And what is delayed in your sight is right on time in God's plan. Think about this. When you plant a seed in the ground, the soil covers it. The darkness surrounds it. And for a time there is no visible sign of growth. But beneath the surface, out of sight, where no human eye can see, life is forming, roots are reaching down, and strength is being built. If you dug it up too soon, you would destroy what God was growing. But if you wait, the moment will come when the seed bursts forth through the soil. No longer hidden, no longer silent, but standing tall as evidence of what God was doing all along. That's what your waiting is like right now. It may feel buried. It may feel dark, it may feel silent, but God is forming something inside you and around you that cannot be stopped when the time of revealing comes. And when it does, it will not be a small sprout. It will be a mighty victory that shifts everything in your life. I want you to hear me tonight. God will never waste your pain, and God will never waste your tears, and God will never waste your waiting. Every sleepless night, every unanswered question, every delay that made you wonder if you were forgotten, it is all being woven into the victory God is preparing. The very thing you thought was holding you back will become the testimony that propels you forward. God is not just going to give you what you've been waiting for. God is going to exceed it. God does not just meet needs, he multiplies blessings. God does not just answer prayers. He fulfills them in ways beyond what you imagined. And the shift from waiting to victory will be so clear, so undeniable, that you will look back and say, now I see why I had to wait. Now I see why God held me back for a season. Now I see that if I had received it earlier, I would not have been ready. I would not have been prepared. I would not have been strong enough to hold it. But God, in his wisdom, timed it perfectly. I know some of you are weary in the waiting. You've carried the weight of unanswered prayers for years. You've watched others move ahead while you stayed behind. You've wondered if maybe God had overlooked you. But let me speak into your spirit with authority. God has not overlooked you. God has not passed you by. God has your name written in the palm of his hand. And God knows the exact moment when the shift will take place. It may not be today. It may not be tomorrow. But when it comes, it will come suddenly, swiftly, and powerfully. One day of God's favor can undo years of struggle. One shift from God can take you from waiting to winning, from pain to power, from loss to overflow. Do not despise the waiting, for the waiting is the womb of your victory. Look at your life right now. Maybe you've been waiting for healing in your body, waiting for a door to open in your career, waiting for restoration in your family, waiting for clarity in your purpose, whatever it is. Do not measure God's timing by your clock. Do not measure God's faithfulness by your feelings. For what you see is limited, but what God sees is eternal. What you feel is temporary, but what God is working is everlasting. The shift is coming, and when it comes, it will not only meet your need, it will magnify God's glory. Others will see it and they will know that it was not chance. It was not chance. It was not coincidence. It was God. And here's what you must understand. God does not shift the waiting into victory just for your sake. He does it so that others may see His power in your life. Your victory will become someone else's hope. Your testimony will become someone else's faith. The way God lifts you will inspire others to keep believing in their own waiting season. That is why the victory has to be undeniable. That is why it has to be major, because God is not just blessing you. He is using you as a living sign of His power. Your life becomes the evidence that God still answers prayer. God still moves mountains. God still turns waiting into victory. I want you to think about where you are right now. Think about the prayers you have prayed, the tears you have cried, the times you have felt like giving up. And then hear this truth. The waiting is not forever. God has already marked the day when the silence will break, when the answer will come, when the doors will swing wide open. It will not be delayed one day longer than necessary. God does not miss appointments. God does not show up late. God's timing is precise. And when He shifts you from waiting to victory, it will be clear that it was God and God alone who did it. When you find yourself in the long corridors of waiting, you are not abandoned. You are under divine construction. The reason it feels quiet is because God is laying beams and foundations that no storm will ever shake. Waiting seasons are sacred classrooms where God trains your faith, stretches your endurance, and sharpens your vision. And if you try to step out too early, you will miss the strength that only waiting can build. That is why you must not despise this place you are in. God is not late. God is not idle. God is not absent. God is preparing you for a moment so powerful, so transformative, that you will one day thank Him for the very delay that once made you weep. Consider this truth. When God shifts your waiting into victory, it will not be a quiet whisper. It will be a trumpet blast that announces His power. It will not be something you can hide in a corner. It will shine like the morning sun. When God moves, He leaves no room for doubt. The same God who commands the galaxies to spin. The same God who sets the tides in motion. The same God who breathes life into dust. That God is the one who will turn your season of waiting into a season of triumph. Nothing is too hard for Him. No delay can outlast Him. No obstacle can stand against Him. When God decides the waiting is over, nothing on earth and nothing in the unseen world can hold back your victory. You must understand that God often allows waiting because He wants to separate your desire from your dependence. Too often we lean on what we want instead of who we need. Waiting purifies your heart so that when the blessing comes, you know it is not the gift that sustains you, but the giver. God is not interested in giving you shallow victories that fade away. He is interested in building victories that anchor your soul in His faithfulness. That is why He sometimes delays. For He is not just shaping your circumstance, He is shaping your character. And when both are ready, the breakthrough will arrive. There is a dangerous lie that creeps into hearts during waiting, and it whispers nothing is happening, you're stuck. But let me tell you the truth. Something is always happening when God is involved. The silence is not empty. The silence is full of divine activity. God is moving pieces you cannot see, arranging people you have not met, aligning opportunities you cannot imagine. You think nothing is happening because your eyes are limited, but God's hands are never still. He is not bound by what you see. He is working in the hidden places. And when the curtain lifts, you will see a masterpiece that could only have been woven by the hands of God. This is why patience is not weakness. Patience is power. Patience is faith stretched out, declaring, I trust God's timing more than I trust my own. Anyone can run after quick results, but it takes strength to stand in the waiting and believe that God's way is better. And when you hold that kind of faith, when you refuse to let despair poison your hope, when you cling to God's promises, even when nothing makes sense, that is when you are preparing yourself for a victory so mighty, that it will silence every doubt that ever tormented your heart. God rewards those who endure, and the reward is never small. God's victories are always larger than the pain that preceded them. I want you to picture this. You are standing on the edge of a vast desert waiting for rain. Days pass, weeks stretch on, and the sky remains clear. People mock you, saying, "Where is the rain? You've been waiting too long." But then when you least expect it, the heavens break open. A flood of rain pours down, rivers swell, fields bloom, and what was barren bursts into life. That is what God's shift feels like. One moment it looks like nothing will change, and the next moment everything is transformed. And when it happens, those who doubted, those who mocked, those who turned away will stand in awe, because it will be undeniable that God Himself poured out the victory. But hear me, God's timing is not meant to frustrate you. It is meant to fortify you. If you could see the end from the beginning, you would not need faith. But God requires faith because faith connects you to His power. Waiting without faith is torment, but waiting with faith is preparation. Every day you wait, believing in God's promise, you are building a foundation that the coming victory will rest upon. Without faith, the victory would collapse. With faith, the victory will stand tall as a monument to God's power. Do not underestimate what your faith in the waiting is doing. It is moving mountains you cannot yet see. It is opening doors you do not yet know exist. It is calling forth blessings that will one day flood your life. And when the waiting ends, you will understand that it was never about delay, it was about alignment. God was aligning your life with His perfect plan. And when the alignment is complete, the blessing will not be partial. It will be complete. God does not shift you halfway. God shifts you fully. And when He does, the weight of waiting will be replaced with the joy of victory. And the sorrow of delay will be swallowed up by the laughter of fulfillment. Some of you listening right now are closer to your shift than you realize. You are one sunrise away, one conversation away, one divine moment away from seeing the waiting turn into victory. And that is why the struggle has been so intense. That is why the doubts have been so loud. Because the enemy always fights hardest when the breakthrough is near. Do not give in. Do not retreat. Stand firm, because the shift is coming. God's word over your life cannot return empty. His promise cannot be broken. His power cannot be stopped. When the appointed time comes, the waiting will shatter and the victory will pour out. Waiting often feels like a wilderness. It feels barren, lonely, and endless. You wake up each day and wonder if today will be the day God moves. And when the silence continues, your heart grows restless. But the wilderness is not a place of punishment. It is a place of preparation. The wilderness is where God strips away distractions, where God teaches you to hear His voice more clearly, where God turns your reliance away from people and places it firmly on Him alone. The wilderness is where you learn that bread cannot satisfy the hunger of your soul, water cannot quench the thirst of your spirit, and applause from people cannot sustain you. Only God can. That is why some of the greatest victories are born out of wilderness seasons. Because when you have nothing and no one else to lean on, you discover that God is more than enough. God allows these wilderness waits because He knows that the moment of victory requires a heart that has been tested. Victory without testing can make you proud. Victory without waiting can make you careless. Victory without tears can make you forget the one who gave it. But when you have waited, when you have been broken, when you have felt the sting of silence, when you have wondered if you could endure another day, and then God shifts everything, you will never take His hand for granted again. You will never think it was your own power that brought the blessing. You will know it was God and God alone. That is the kind of victory God desires for you, one that humbles you and glorifies Him. Some of you have been asking God for a door to open, and it has remained shut. But hear me, God sometimes shuts doors not to punish you, but to protect you. If you had walked through that door too early, it might have destroyed you. If you had received that position before your character was ready, the pressure would have crushed you. If that relationship had come before your spirit was mature, it would have distracted you from your purpose. God knows what you cannot see. God knows what you are not ready for. God knows when the weight of blessing would break you rather than build you. And so He waits, and so He delays. But when the time is right, when you are strengthened, when your roots have gone deep, He will open the right door. and no man will be able to close it. That is the shift that transforms waiting into victory. Think of the power of God's timing. One day of His favor can overturn a lifetime of struggle. One word from His mouth can change the course of history. One act of His power can take a person from obscurity to influence, from bondage to freedom, from despair to overflowing joy. And yet that kind of shift cannot come before the appointed time. It cannot come 1 second early because God is a God of perfect order. He is never behind schedule. He is never rushed. He is never caught off guard. He knows exactly what He is doing. And when He moves, you will see that every second of waiting had a purpose. Every delay had a reason. Every closed door was a shield. Every unanswered prayer was a sit-up for something better than you dreamed. Do not mistake God's silence for His absence. The silence is often where His greatest work is done. The silence is where your faith is purified. The silence is where you stop chasing quick fixes and start learning to rest in His promises. And when you can trust God in silence, you are ready to celebrate Him in victory. The silence is not the end of the story. It is the prelude to the chapter of triumph. Just as the darkest night comes before the sunrise, so the longest silence often comes before the loudest breakthrough. Hold on, because the sunrise is coming. And when God shifts your waiting into victory, the light will be so bright it will erase the shadows of the night that preceded it. What you must also understand is that God does not just shift circumstances, He shifts people. Sometimes the waiting feels long because God is changing you while He prepares the blessing. You ask for the blessing, but God wants to bless the person you are becoming, not the person you were. The waiting transforms you. It takes away arrogance and replaces it with humility. It removes fear and replaces it with faith. It breaks selfishness and replaces it with compassion. God knows that true victory is not just what happens around you. It is what happens within you. If the blessing comes and your heart is not ready, you will waste it. But when the blessing comes and your heart is aligned with God, you will multiply it. You will steward it. You will honor Him with it. That is why the shift requires patience, because God is not simply changing your situation. He is changing your spirit. Many people despise waiting because they think nothing is happening. But if you could see into the unseen, you would fall to your knees in awe. You would see angels moving on assignment. You would see obstacles being dismantled. You would see traps being dismantled before you ever fall into them. You would see opportunities being aligned in ways beyond human imagination. The waiting feels empty only because your eyes cannot see the fullness of what God is arranging. But just because you cannot see it does not mean it is not real. God's hand is moving even when His face is hidden. And when the moment of revealing comes, you will look back and realize He was working all along. Do not forget that God is the one who turns the impossible into the inevitable. What men say cannot be done, God declares will be done. What circumstances insist will never change, God shifts in a moment. What looks like a permanent roadblock to you is nothing but a stepping stone in the hand of God. He specializes in turning dead ends into open highways, deserts into rivers, graves into gardens, and silence into songs of victory. That is the God you are waiting on. That is the God who has promised to shift your waiting into triumph. That is the God who has never failed and who will not fail you. Now there comes a time in every life when the weight of waiting feels almost unbearable. You wonder if your prayers are reaching beyond the ceiling. You question whether your cries are falling into silence. But let me declare this truth to your heart. Your prayers are not lost. Your cries are not ignored, and your faith is not wasted. God hears every whisper. God counts every tear, and God records every act of endurance. He is not a distant spectator to your pain. He is the one who is holding your story in His hands. When He moves, He does not simply answer. He answers in a way that lifts you higher than you imagine, in a way that silences every doubt, in a way that proves His power to all who see. Understand this, God uses waiting to break chains that you did not even know were holding you. Sometimes the greatest chains are not external, they are internal. Chains of fear, chains of doubt, chains of pride, or chains of insecurity. When the shift comes, you will not only have the blessing, you will have the freedom to carry it. Think of it this way. A fruit that ripens too quickly may look ready on the outside, but inside it is bitter and unprepared. And just because you do not see movement does not mean nothing is happening. God is aligning circumstances, shifting hearts, preparing opportunities, removing obstacles, and setting the stage for your major victory. You may see nothing with your eyes, but in the unseen realm, everything is shifting in your favor. The greatest trap of waiting is not time itself, but the lies that whisper into your soul, lies that say you are forgotten, you are overlooked, you are wasting your years. But hear this clearly. The God who created time cannot be late. The one who set the sun, moon, and stars into their place does not lose track of your life. He has already written your days before you lived a single one. That means your waiting is not wasted. It is woven into the very design of your destiny. It is not delay. It is divine orchestration. And when God decides the time is full, the shift will happen suddenly. And every lie you believe in the darkness will be shattered by the brilliance of His light. Do not let your heart grow bitter in the waiting, because bitterness blinds you to what God is preparing. Many allow disappointment to harden their hearts, and they miss the beauty of what God is doing. Even now, instead of bitterness, let the waiting drive you into deeper trust. Let it press you closer to God. Waiting is not punishment, it is invitation. It is God calling you to know Him beyond the surface, to discover His strength when yours runs dry, to see His power when your own hands can do nothing. The waiting is where intimacy with God is born. And intimacy is the very thing that will carry you into victory. God is not just working on the outcome. He is working on you. He is shaping you into someone who can handle the weight of victory. Victories are not light. They carry responsibility, they draw attention, they test character. And God in His wisdom knows that without preparation, a blessing too soon can become a burden. So while you're waiting, He is strengthening your faith, sharpening your discernment, deepening your humility, enlarging your vision. He is building a foundation strong enough to sustain the blessing that is on the way. You are not just waiting for victory. You are becoming the kind of person who can walk in it without stumbling. There is power in knowing that God's timing is perfect. If you receive what you ask for at the wrong time, it could destroy you. But when God gives it at the right time, it multiplies you. That is why you must trust not only what God gives, but also when He gives it. Timing is as much a part of the blessing as the blessing itself. And when His timing intersects with your faith, the result will be nothing less than a life-altering breakthrough. I tell you this, the shift God is preparing will not be a small adjustment. It will be a reversal, a complete turning of the tide. Where you were once last, you will be placed first. Where you were overlooked, you will be chosen. Where you were mocked, you will be honored. Where you were burdened, you will be lifted. That is the kind of victory God specializes in. He takes the very places of your pain and transforms them into platforms for His glory. He takes the years of waiting and compresses them into a single moment of sudden triumph. But you must remain ready. A shift requires movement. God can open the door, but you must walk through it. God can release the blessing, but you must steward it. Waiting is not passive, it is preparation. Do not spend your waiting season in despair. Spend it sharpening your spirit, renewing your mind, strengthening your faith. Because when the victory comes, it will demand that you rise, that you act, that you step into a new level of responsibility and courage. Remember, God does not forget His promises. If He has spoken it into your heart, He will bring it to pass. Not a single word from His mouth falls to the ground empty. Heaven and earth may shake. Circumstances may shift, but the word of God endures forever. That means if you are holding on to a promise in your waiting, you are not holding on to wishful thinking. You are holding on to certainty. What God has spoken, He will perform. And when that moment comes, you will look back at the waiting not with regret, but with gratitude. Because you will see that it was in the waiting you discovered the strength of your faith, the depth of your trust, the reality of God's presence. You will see that without the waiting, you would not have been ready for the victory. And in that moment of triumph, you will declare with conviction it was worth it. Every trial, every delay, every sleepless night, it was worth it because God has given me victory beyond what I imagined. When you are in the waiting room of life, it is easy to believe that you are forgotten. But let me assure you, God never misplaces children. He never loses track of His promises. Every second of your waiting is accounted for, measured with precision, and covered with purpose. God does not deal in wasted moments. If He has allowed you to remain in the waiting, It is because there is something being written in you that only waiting can produce. And when the shift finally breaks through, you will see that not a single day was wasted. Not a single prayer was ignored. Not a single tear went unseen. Waiting often feels like weakness, but in God's hands, waiting becomes your greatest weapon. Because while the world rushes, you are being refined. While others chase after quick solutions, you are anchored in God's eternal timing. And when the shift happens, the strength you gained in the waiting will make you unshakable. You will not be fragile in your victory. You will not be easily toppled by opposition. You will be rooted deeply in the truth that what God begins, He finishes, and what He promises, He fulfills. Think about the power of this truth. A delay with God is not denial. It is design. He delays not because He cannot act, but because He wants to act in such a way that His glory cannot be denied. If victory came too quickly, people might say it was luck, coincidence, or your own effort. But when victory comes after a long silent waiting, there can be no doubt it was God. He alone will be magnified. That is why the waiting is often long, because God is removing every possibility that the credit could go elsewhere. When the shift happens, even your enemies will know that only God could have done this. Do not despise the stillness, because in stillness God plants strength that business cannot give. In the quiet moments when it feels like nothing is moving, God is teaching you to rely on Him alone. When the noise fades and you have nothing left but faith, you discover that faith is enough. You discover that God is enough, and that revelation born in the waiting will become the bedrock of your victory. When the shift finally comes, it will be more than just a change in circumstances. It will be a holy turning point, one that leaves you speechless because of the sheer magnitude of what God has prepared for you. It will not simply be about receiving a blessing. It will be about carrying an unshakable conviction, a deep, immovable knowing that God is faithful beyond what you can comprehend. This conviction will echo through your life, louder than the victory itself, because it is forged in the fires of waiting, of questioning, of holding on when everything around you seems silent. I must tell you this with absolute certainty. The longer the waiting, the greater the glory of the victory. We often underestimate what God is doing in the unseen. We think delays mean denial. We assume silence means absence. But in reality, the waiting is sacred ground. It is the place where roots grow deep, where faith is strengthened, and where you learn to trust God for who He is rather than for what He gives. Do you really think God would allow you to endure this long, painful season only to hand you something ordinary? Absolutely not. A long wait means a massive blessing is in the making, one that will not only answer your prayers, but will exceed them in ways that will leave you in awe. If the silence feels heavy right now, it is because the answer that is coming will roar with the undeniable power of God. You will know it wasn't random chance, it wasn't coincidence, it wasn't something you managed to make happen, it was the hand of God moving in your life. And when He moves, He does it in ways that silence every doubt and erase every sleepless night you've spent wondering if He still hears you. If the night feels endless, it is only because the dawn will blaze with a brightness you could never have imagined. God never wastes pain, and He never allows suffering without purpose. Every tear, every disappointment, every delay, it is all being woven into a testimony that will one day speak of His goodness and faithfulness in a way nothing else could. So do not measure your future by the pain of your present. Pain is temporary, but the promises of God are eternal. Measure your future by the greatness of the one who holds it. Because He is too faithful to forget you, too loving to forsake you, and too powerful to let this season end in anything less than glory. The waiting is not empty. It is pregnant with purpose. And when the shift comes, you will see why the night had to be so long, because the morning was always meant to be this bright.